Ena mana, ena reo, e rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Helen Nicholson, tōku ingoa, te tumu whakarai taupua, te wharewanga o tāko. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora, my name's Helen Nicholson, and I'm the Acting Vice-Chancellor at the University of Otago, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural professorial lecture to mark the promotion of Gisela Sol to Professor. And this is the first professorial lecture this year, in Dunedin anyway, so welcome to it. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Gisela's family and friends who are with us in person and online, and I'd like to give a special welcome to Gisela's husband Chris, and daughter Claudia and son Sebastian, who are with us, and her brother Mikhail, sisters Monica and Heidi, and their families who are joining from South Africa. So as I've said before, promotion to Professor at the University of Otago is not easily achieved, and it requires an academic to show outstanding competence and leadership in teaching, research and service. And as you'll hear shortly, Gisela's demonstrated all of these. It's particularly special for me to introduce Gisela's IPL this evening. Gisela, I had this pleasure of being one of Gisela's PhD student supervisors and a student. I learned a lot from her. And we've stayed friends ever since. In fact, we have shared interests. We both sing in the city choir of Dunedin, but at other sides of the hall, and we both go to St John's Church, so it's good to be there. It's also very special for me because Gisela is the first of my PhD students from Otago to become a professor, so it's lovely that I can be here. Congratulations, Gisela, on your well-deserved promotion. I'm very much looking forward to your lecture. And I'm now going to hand over to Professor Lee Hale, who's going to give a formal introduction to Professor Sol.
Tēnā koutou katoa, no te kumari pā aho, ko te manataki aho, ko Lee Hale tuko ingoa. Good evening, my name's Lee Hale and I'm the Dean of the School of Physiotherapy. And a very warm welcome to you all on this very significant celebration, Professor Gisela Sol's inaugural professorial lecture. It's a mouthful, that. And a very special welcome to Gisela's family, Chris, Claudia and Sebastian, and to a family linking in from South Africa. Goeiemorgen, good morning to you all and welcome. Notably, Gisela's promotion to professorship is only the second one that has occurred in our school via the internal promotion process. So very well done on this outstanding achievement. Gisela joined the school in 2001. She came to us from South Africa, having completed her Bachelor of BSc Physiotherapy at the University of Stellenbosch and her BSc Honours and MSc in Exercise Science at the University of Cape Town. She had a varied work history in South Africa, working in one military hospital in Pretoria, and then an acute and a sports injury clinic in Switzerland, and then back to private practice in Cape Town, and then as a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town's Department of Physiotherapy. Gisela went on to attain her PhD from Otago in 2008, with work focusing on hamstring injuries. For those in the audience who are runners, if I'm not mistaken, one of Gisela's PhD advisors is the internationally renowned Professor Tim Stokes, author of Law of Running. Is that correct? Yeah. At Otago, Gisela has gone on to develop expertise in teaching and research in the areas of sports physiotherapy and musculoskeletal and manual manipulative therapy. In particular, research is focused on ACL injuries, shoulder pain, and in implementing a sport framework for students with concussion in secondary schools. She has successfully obtained both internal and external grant funding to support this research, and recently was awarded a 3-year HRC project grant to investigate stepped rehabilitation for people with persistent pain. And she is also a Stanley Paris Research Fellow. In her research, Gisela collaborates with international researchers from Sweden, the States, Canada, and Japan. She has supervised or co-supervised 11 PhD and 4 master students to completion, as well as a number of B50 honours student projects. She has a really robust publishing record, having published over 86 peer-reviewed journals, many in high-impact journals such as Sports Medicine and the British Journal of Sports Medicine. Her presentation tonight will showcase the diverse range of methodologies she uses within this research. Key areas of teaching for Gisela are the postgraduate paper in sports physiotherapy, the school's B50 honours research paper, and also ensuring that our undergraduate students are trained in sports medicing and team up with local sports teams here and nationally. You can ask her what sports medicing is if you don't understand that. Gisela has undertaken a range of service roles in our school, including Associate Dean of Undergrad Studies, Chairperson of the school's Ethics Committee, and is currently the school's Deputy Dean. Her wider services extend to the being on the University's Board of Studies, Senate, and has been President of the Otago Medical School Research Society. She's been on numerous physiotherapy New Zealand committees, including twice being the scientific chair of our PNZ National Conference. And she's the New Zealand representative on the Australian Physiotherapy Council Accreditation Committee. And I think I'll leave it at that in highlighting Gisela's CV, as you've come to hear her talk, not me. So in short, Gisela is well deserving of her professorialship, and very well done from the School of Physiotherapy. Now I'd like to invite Gisela to present her IPL entitled Movement for Health, Head, Shoulder, Knees. And I did ask her, where are and toes? Because I know she does research on the foot, but I'll leave her to elaborate on that. Gisela.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Nō tia mama me Afrika ki te tonga o ko Tupuna. Ko Friedrich Damann rahu, ko Gustav Lauterbach o ko Tupuna matua. Ko Hannah Burma rahu, ko Hannah Clinford o ko Tupuna whaia. Ko Luisa Maria Dorothea Damann rawa ko Günther Ewald Lauterbach o ko matua. Ko Michael Lauterbach to ko Tungane. Ko Monika Volker, rawa ko Heidi Stroh o ko Taina. Ko Chris Sol, with Chris. Ta ko Anna. Ko Claudia Radau, ko Sebastian a ko Tamariki. Ko Lauterbach Sol to ko Whanau. Ko Otapoti wahi inoho ana aho. Ko Gisela Sol taka ingma. Lee and Helen, thank you for the invitation, or for the kind introduction. Friends, of course, the family, also online, neighbors, long-time friends, choir, church friends, and I think there's some runners here as well, somewhere over there. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is an absolute honor to share not only about my research, but a little bit about myself and how I got to where I am now. So the story of my family starts in Germany when my ancestors immigrated to South Africa in the late 1800s, and they settled in the eastern part of the country. My father, Günther, was born on a farm just outside a tiny little village called Wartburg, or Wartburg in English. It was called Sandy Mount during the World War II, and then got back to Wartburg again afterwards. And he wanted to become an architect, but he had to leave school as a teenager and start an apprenticeship to become a builder and a carpenter. And we have some of his furniture with us in our house. My mother was born or grew up in the northern part of Natal, what it was called then, and a little German Lutheran community called Uelzen. She came down to Wartburg for her high school at the Wartburg Kirchdorf Hochschule, where we went well, and that's where she met her future husband in the youth group. She had to return home after school because her father did not think women should have a career. Much has changed, and that was normal at that stage for many fathers. They were married by the time that my mom was 21, and they had 4 children, Michael and the 2 younger sisters for me, Monica and Heidi. This photo was taken 2014, the last Christmas where we were all together with my parents. And I do want to acknowledge my sister-in-law Gudrun, who passed away in December, quite unexpectedly. My father, being a builder, he built our little house on the farm next to the house of my grandparents, this tiny little cottage, thatched roof. And as builders do, they extend the house and they extend and extend. My mom once says she's never lived in a fully completed house. But it turned out to be quite a large house, and my mom did the gardening with help, but she absolutely had green fingers. We went to the Witwatersrand Hochschule, as I've said. This photo was taken of probably a third of my class in 2019, reunion just before COVID hit us. The first 4 years at school were in German, and we started learning English when I was about 9 or 10, and Afrikaans as well. And then 2 years later, the German and the English speakers were merged into one class, and it was all English. And we all had to do German as a foreign language, and of course, in matric, we all got A's. Then, as Lee already said, I went to the University of Stellenbosch. Some people thought that I was going to study mathematics and music, and were very surprised when I came back and said I'm actually doing physiotherapy. I was the dux of the class and also did grade 8 piano exam in my last year. My love for music comes from my parents. My mother was a pianist and organ player, and I remember falling asleep as a child with her practicing the piano for her next exam. So she did become a piano teacher. My father did not learn an instrument really well. He played the trumpet, as many Lutherans do, but was very involved in the choir, a Bach choir, which is quite common in the German Lutheran community. And he was a chairperson, so that's where my love for choir singing comes as well. So coming back here, I did work in Durban first and then in the military hospital in Pretoria, so I always get itchy feet and always moved quite a lot in those times. And there came a time where I thought, what else can I do? Should I become a doctor? I did apply for medicine, but chickened out and went to Switzerland instead. I got a position in Kantonsspital Aarau, which Aarau is halfway between Basel and Zurich, and stayed there for about 18 months. And this is the team, the nursing team of the neurosurgery ward. So neurosurgery, musculoskeletal surgery. I've done all the rotations in terms of physiotherapy. I then met a physio who by chance was opening a clinic in Zurich in the middle of a fitness center or a gym. And that was very unusual for physios at that time in the 1980s to work in gyms. So that was an incredibly great experience for me in terms of exercise prescription. At that time, I also started to do more courses in manipulative physiotherapy, particularly in the Jeff Maitland's concept, which originated in Australia. And what struck me with him, so he was influential for me as a clinician. What struck me was his absolute humility and the way that he communicated with the patient. Person-centered care was absolutely Maitland back in the 1980s already and earlier. And here on his own course, he was filming a young instructor called Harry van Pekkarts from the Netherlands, demonstrating new techniques on Maitland's own wife. So he was willing to learn from young people on his course, and that really impressed me. I was in Switzerland for 4 years, made fantastic friends, and was in the mountains. This was a snowshoeing expedition with my physio friends. I could go to different cities just for a weekend, Vienna, come back, go to work, next week in Salzburg, that kind of lifestyle. But then after 4 years, 1 year became 4 years, I had to make a decision what I wanted to do, stay there or go back to South Africa. Tall people really stand out in Switzerland. And I decided to go back this time to University of Cape Town to, as Lee said, to do the exercise science at that university at honours level. And the reason why I did exercise science was because that was the only postgrad course that was available for physios in the beginning of the 1990s. So it's by default that I did an exercise science postgrad. And Tim Noakes did influence me, And I think I credit my critical thinking skills from him. And also, he absolutely exemplified that the willingness to change his own beliefs if evidence does not stack up. So he influenced me as a researcher, whereas Maitland probably influenced me as a clinician. After that, I wasn't sure what to do, and I had a conversation with Professor Pat Baubank of the physio department, and she suggested I apply for a position that was open for musculoskeletal physio. And I said, well, I don't know what else to do. I might as well try teaching. So everything in my career has been very circumstantial. And I did start teaching muscular at undergrad level. I did clinical education in the outpatients department of Groote Schuur and in retreat in the poor community where our fourth years were placed. And then I worked in the exercise science, developed a master's degree from the honors degree for sports physios. But then, as it happens, you meet somebody and you get married. He graduated as a physiotherapist, and we had Claudia and Sebastian. And after Sebastian's birth, I resigned from university, joined Chris in his practice, 207 Main Road, Rondebosch. I worked 3 mornings a week and then looked after, just because of flexibility. But I always thought I wanted to get back to academia, and it was by pure coincidence that I saw an advert from the University of Otago. I didn't really know where it was. I knew where Dunedin was, but I wrote to John, and that email, probably an email, or maybe it was a letter to John, became an application that became an interview in person. There was no Zoom at that stage. And that became an offer. And then it was really, really tricky for us, because we didn't really want to. We weren't desperate to leave South Africa, but this was an opportunity for me. And in the end, we did decide. We took the children. They did not have a choice. They were 2 and 4, from their grandparents and the extended family, so the German Verwandtschaft. And that was a big loss that we had. But we came here and met many other people. And it's worked out well. I did complete the PhD as well, and that initially was part of the attraction. So I work in musculoskeletal and sports physio, and when I was a student, I wanted to be a pediatric physio. That's all I wanted. But then the opportunities that came up when I needed an opportunity was all in musculoskeletal and sports, and that's how I landed in this area. We know that musculoskeletal conditions are leading causes of living with disability globally. It's not always obvious, because not everybody is limping or everybody's walking with crutches, so it's often hidden. And the New Zealand stats also show the high frequency of disability-adjusted life years for them. So it's not more important than any other field, but it is important. I'm in sports as well, and somebody may recognize that gentleman at the front. Sports is not all about winning. It is about participation. It's about building communities. It's about social connections. And it's that what people lose when they get a serious injury. It's not just about the injury. You can use it to build self-esteem that then spreads to other areas of their life as well. So there are many benefits of keeping people active, and I'm interested in sports. And it's sports physios that often spend hours of voluntary hours next to the sports field to get people back to the sports that they love. So I think sports physio, yes, we all like the people running on the field in the football World Cup, but that's only a pinnacle, or only a few physios who actually want to do that. So there you've got the toes. I'm not going to talk about them today, but I'll talk about the concussion, the shoulder injuries, and the knees, but in the reverse order. And in research, we have to break questions down into little bits, a little bit at a time. So if you explore ACL injuries, you might look just at the movement at the knee, and I'm doing that in the biomechanics lab. So that's the mechanism of the injury. We also have to, of course, think about the person as such and their role in society, and that's what we're doing with qualitative research, so interviewing people and stakeholders. And that's where the clinical studies come in as well. And then the last level that I'll talk last about is the systems-based approach, which came by chance, in a sense, concussion in schools. So I'll talk about all of those. So the problem with ACL injuries is not the frequency. They're not as frequent as ankle sprains or calf strains or hamstring strains, but they have a very long recovery time, up to a year for community level athletes. Just over half of the people with ACL rupture return to competitive sports for more than 2 years. So just over half. And so quite often they are offered surgery to get them back to sport, but the evidence shows that it's actually not as high as what we would like. So they do have that long-term disability in a sense where they can't get back to the levels where they were beforehand. It has a high re-injury risk, not only of the same knee, but the opposite knee is also at risk. And there is that long-term risk of osteoarthritis with concomitant decreased physical activity and weight gain. So an ACL injury, I always say, is not just the injury, it's a chronic health condition that we have to find out how we can, particularly that chronic health, that the long-term outcomes for some of them, not for all, some do really well, but that's where the health need is in terms of ACL reconstruction. So we did qualitative studies and laboratory-based studies, and I do use students, I invite them onto my research. And here was Sarah Scott, who's now actually completed her PhD in a different topic, and Mandeep Kaur was my PhD candidate. So Sarah interviewed people less than 2 years after reconstruction, and Mandeep was up to 10 years after the surgery. And they all spoke about the very convoluted journey. It's not a straight path to get to for recovery. They valued the therapeutic alliance. So the relationship with the clinician could be a barrier, but it was a very strong facilitator. So, and in particular the physios, who often take time to get to know the patient. So that was absolutely critical for the long term, and also to get them through the depressive times that they often go through. Support systems were the parents, it was the employers, because often they are on light duty for long, and then those coaches and teams who made an effort to keep them engaged. So that was important to them. They did describe severe loss of identity, because these are often, at community level, very, very passionate sports people, and then they lose their position for up to a year. And that comes also with social isolation and grieving and depression. And I think we as physios, we need to identify those low moods in our patients when we work with them. Mandeep in particular explored that fear of re-injury. There's a high risk, so that fear is rational. It's not an irrational fear, or anxiety or hesitation, whatever we want to call that. In physio, we just speak in terms of fear. So she wanted to explore what is it about that injury that has that high fear injury. And for most, it's the pain. It's incredible, but they just know something severe has happened. And you can see this on the footballer's face here. The pain of the injury, and then again when they have surgery, because it's an enormous insult to the knee, the surgery itself. And they spoke about the injury being absolutely, or not the injury mechanism, exactly what they were doing, remains imprinted in the mind, and they can't get rid of that. And it's a movement that subconsciously they just avoid ever again. The social isolation and the long rehab feeds into the fear, because quite often they have higher work commitments. They might have children that are growing up, that they think they will never be able to go through another surgery and another rehabilitation again. So the fear is not only about the injury itself, it's about all the social aspects that go with that injury that feeds into it. So we listened to those, and some did well, others did not. And in this study with Kiran Mahut, his honours, we wanted to listen to people who thought that they had done really well. So what worked well to get them back to where they wanted to be? And there are half the people at least do really well. And these are the three themes. So the first one is a driver for return to sport. These are people that say they refuse to give up the athletic identity. And they're absolutely mentally tough. One person was saying he was sitting at that sideline after a second injury, and he said to himself, I've done this, I will do it again. And just that mental stamina was evident in them. And they were totally committed to their team and didn't want to lose them down. They prepared the body as well as the mind. And the connectedness, that's where the relationships come in, is again, having a physio, for example, whom they could text or email at any time and know within a day or two they would get a response. Just to have that reassurance was really important to them when they felt vulnerable. Of course, they describe physical rehab. That's what our profession's about. But some of them also spoke in detail about cognitive skills from a mental skills coach, but most patients don't have access to that. Some had been in treatment elsewhere for mental wellness and then used those skills in terms to get them back to where they wanted. So I think we, as physios, we talk about psychologically informed interventions, and those should become more important even than what they're now. At the end of the day, if they wanted to get back to sport, they just had to accept the risk. And some said, it's fine, I'll just do it, I'm just not worried. Others spoke about situational risk analysis, where they trained themselves to very quickly, split-second, make a decision whether they're going to kick that ball or leave it. So very quick decision-making that they learned. And then we really liked this. One person said her coach said she can't get back to the rugby team if she's not ready for chaos and confusion. And we added that with confidence. And I think that's where, as physios, we often fall through a bit. We want perfect, beautiful movement patterns. But here we have to prepare them for unpredictability in any direction, even in the non-standard, beautiful movements. So less focus on perfect movement patterns, more focus on unpredictability. I think that is crucial to get these back to their sport or to their work. So those were qualitative studies, and this is now the laboratory study where we did a cross-sectional study. It's part of Mandeep's PhD study. So she recruited 25 participants with ACL reconstructions up to 10 years post-op and 24 controls. And as you would expect, they had weaker quads and hams on the injured side compared to the uninjured side, and also compared to the controls. That's not surprising at all. And the quality of life. So the COOS is a questionnaire we can give people with knee pain. And the quality of life section was very low in the ACL cohort, 47 compared to 80 out of 100. Cohorts normally in studies are between 80 and 90, maybe 95. So, but there's a large standard deviation for the injured ones. So some did well, but there is a cohort of people with ACL injuries who in the long term don't do well. We also asked the people to walk up and down those steps. Movement analysis, cameras around them. There's a force plate in the ground, and the skin markers are picked up by the cameras. And we found that they were walking up and down the step with a stiffer knee, so less knee flexion and lower knee flexion moments. So that indicates that there's a persistent subconscious protection or unloading of the knee, even up to 10 years after the injury. So these really have long-term consequences for some people. So in Mandeep's qualitative study, some participants said to help them with fear or give them confidence, they used a knee brace or a sleeve as part when they're training or when they are feeling vulnerable. And then we decided, well, we want to see whether knee sleeves really do make a difference because it's elastic. It doesn't support the knee as such. It doesn't stabilize it. And I happened, again by chance, have a conversation with Niels Hammer, who was in the Department of Anatomy, who had linked to a commercial company in Germany called Bauerfeind, who had a knee sleeve. So we contacted them, and they were happy to fund us. But other than that, they weren't involved in the study at all. But I reported to them. So for that one, we had 34 participants up to 5 years, and we used this a different activity. So a person was standing on the box, and then we asked them to step down very fast and hop forwards. And that's what it looks like. And we were interested in what is happening at the knee during that stance phase, but they did not know what we were looking for, and we didn't give them any instructions. We just said as fast as they can. So the black line here is the knee flexion angle. So at contact, the knee is normally in about 10 degrees of extension. You drop down to about 40 to 45 degrees, and then the knee extends as the person jumps forwards. So the black line is the control, or the opposite side, the opposite uninjured side. The red line is the knee angle for the injured side. So you see that it's slightly lower, so less knee flexion. The green line is for with the knee sleeve. So there you see it moves back towards the more black line. So on observation, it looks as though it makes a difference, and it actually does. So this is statistical parametric mapping, and comparing the unsleeved uninjured side to the uninjured side, the significant difference is midway. So it's over here at peak flexion. So they had 4 degrees less flexion on average without the knee sleeve. With the knee sleeve, the area of interest was in the first third. So from touchdown, a few seconds, and that is where most of the ACL injuries occur. It's in that split second as soon as the person lands. So basically what we've shown is that the knee sleeve can change the movement patterns without telling the person about it at all. And we often train people to land with a softer knee. And the studies show that it only improves by about 3 degrees, and that's exactly what the knee sleeve did. So I'm not saying that we have to use a knee sleeve for everybody, because exercise is still the first part, but in some people it might be useful to give them confidence as a tool, just as one tool in the rehab. So probably what happens, so we did find that increased knee flexion, landing with a softer knee. So another variable that we looked at that also showed increased control in that first split second on landing, and that's where the ACL injuries occur. So probably if you have fear, you're afraid of an injury, we all start moving a bit stiffer, and we start moving slower, and we get less active. So the movement patterns change, activity change. Just add a little bit of confidence, and perhaps that is enough in some people to sort of normalize the movement and motivate them to get active. So that's what that study showed. So overall, for all the ACL rehab, rehabilitation is never complete. It's a long-term rehab that's needed, perhaps booster sessions in the long term. Somebody who they can contact for advice. They need to strengthen and maintain the thigh strength in the long term, because they normally increase, and then after 2 years it goes down again, in particular when they drop out of the sports. We need to do everything we can to boost their confidence. And perhaps for some, a knee sleeve can be helpful, but exercise will always remain the main thing. We have to address their beliefs and their anxieties, and also help them to change to another sport that can inspire them if they do have to drop out. And sometimes in research, I think, Nadine, you said in research, there's sometimes this interesting, maybe Chad, there's interesting other things you find. And what we found in our volunteers, that 30% of them were obese. They had a BMI over 300. Mandeep's study, it was 60% that were either overweight or obese, as opposed to 30% for the controls. So this is being described at the moment internationally, weight gain after an ACL injury and physical activity. And that's where I say it is a chronic health condition in some of these people, but not all. So if you're sitting with an ACL injury, it's not all bad news. But we have to be aware of that. So that was my knee research. Now we're coming to the shoulder. And here I also do experimental pain work, and then the whole person. And in the laboratory, this comes from Craig Bossender's work. We happened to have a talk with David Baxter at a conference, and said that he would want to come here as a postdoc, and that was possible. So he and his wife Kate came over, and we had a common interest in shoulders, so we started the study. To do biomechanical studies on acute pain, you will never get a person with an acute injury into the lab. It's not safe, and the person probably wouldn't volunteer anyway. So that's why we use the experimental pain study. The way we do that, we take half a teaspoonful of salt water and inject it in the back, and that's what Dr. Hamish Osborne did for us. So you have two conditions, experimental pain condition and control, and there's a crossover trial. And we did quite a few. In those 15 minutes of the pain, after 15 minutes, the pain is gone. Although they don't believe it while the pain is there. Claudia was a participant. So you have to do as much as you can in those 15 minutes. So I'll show you just samples. So here the blue line is the control condition, the red is the pain. And this side here is for the muscle strength. We call it torque. So sitting, twisting out and twisting in, external internal rotation. And there was an immediate drop in strength, as you would imagine for somebody who's got pain. And the throw index was how often they got that ball into the box, the accuracy, and that also dropped by 20%. And that's exactly what we find in people with pain, with shoulder, with a real injury. So often people can have pain, and it's the pain that inhibits the strength. It's not a change in the muscle, it's a change in the brain. So it's governed by the brain. We did proprioception as well, because we physios like the word proprioception. And one variable we can look at is motion sense. So that's where the person sits, arms on the lever, blindfolded. They hear white noise so that they don't know what's going on. And the lever slowly starts turning half a degree a second. And they press on the other hand as soon as they know that the arm is moving and whether it's moving out or in. And our hypothesis was that in pain, it would take longer, because that's what decreased proprioception would be. But we were surprised. In the pain here we had an ABA design. So the pain condition, they responded faster, which means that proprioception was enhanced. And it does make sense, because if somebody has a sore arm and they just do a small movement, they'll immediately grab that arm. So we as physios can't assume that proprioception is always worse in these patients. And I queried this in a book chapter that I was asked to write in the shoulder book. And I'm starting to query, do we actually need proprioceptive exercise? Because every exercise we do entails proprioception. So I think we need to simplify our reasoning in terms of exercise prescription. So after those studies, we were suddenly contacted by somebody called Jean-Sébastien Roy from Laval University, and asked whether he can come here. I think it was because we could get ethics for this kind of work, and bring his own equipment. I said, of course, he's most welcome. So we knocked on Hamish's door again. Craig came back on a sabbatical, now with 2 girls as well. And Frédérique Dupuy was the RA, she's now a PhD student. And we had lots of fun in the lab together, while some people had pain. So this was more sophisticated with inertial sensors and EMG, and this is what it looked like to the participants. Memories of that? So here the instruction was that they had to move as accurately and as fast as possible to follow the ball. And it was unpredictable, and that is really important. They did not know what the next movement was. And so that is more relevant to sports-related movements or work-related. And we did find that they were slower and less accurate. They moved with a stiffer arm, like ACL people walk with a stiffer knee. They had less flexion in their shoulder. But not only the shoulder, the elbow also moved less. So everything was stiffer. And then, of course, they used more trunk movement. When looking at EMG, the top line, and I've warped these so that there's more of a dynamic. You see the control, it took faster. In the pain condition, they were slower. So in the control condition, the amplitude muscle activity for the muscle up here increases sharply and then decreases again. For the control group, it works harder. If you look at those units, 1.5 versus 2, for the it's an arbitrary unit. And also they take longer, and they get longer to reach that peak. So they become far more cautious. And that also held up with the mean of the conditions. So what do these studies show? Well, experimental studies seldom tell us what we should change in clinical practice, but they add to our understanding. So it's likely a protective mechanism controlled by the brain. That's what you see in those immediate changes. Another observation was that there was enormous variability of the scapular movements, and that also comes from another PhD student's work, Zori Tangrove. As physios, we always look at the humerus scapular rhythm and think there should be a perfect pattern. But that does not hold up in real life. There's enormous variability. So again, I think as a physio, we should think about these perfect movement patterns that we want to try to achieve. Already said, we need to think about proprioceptive exercise. And then for function, shoulder exercise should be done in multiple directions, multiple speeds, multiple variations. Think about this person who has worked with an animal who can be very unexpected, or the sports person. So that was laboratory-based studies. Now coming to the clinical study. I call this the Otago Shoulder Health Research Pathway, and the acronym is OCHO. My family knows why OCHO is so important. It's the OCHO chocolate. But the problem with this it's also called shoulder impingement. And the problem with this condition is we don't always know exactly what is going on in the shoulder. And one of the reasons is that many of you, whoever's 50 years and older, if there are 10 of you, one of you will have a partial rotator cuff tear and you won't even know it. And if you know it, it won't predict whether you will have pain or not. So in a group of people where there are people who circumstantially find out that there's something wrong in the shoulder, either rotator cuff tear or maybe of the labrum, and then those who don't have anything, we don't know who is going to be the person who's got the pain. So as a physio, we screen out reasons to refer the patient to a doctor, making sure there's something else is going on, but then we treat the patient, we assess the patient and prescribe exercise manual therapy according to that. And international best practice is patient education. I call them clinical conversations, exercise and staying active, and then manual therapy as a very important adjunct, often to help them to get active. So the kaupapa of this pathway is to develop non-surgical care for people with rotator cuff related shoulder pain that focus on self-management and is relevant for Aotearoa New Zealand. And the self-management is important because this kind of pain often comes back. It's like a cold or a flu. That's what Jeremy Lewis says, a UK specialist. It's like a cold, comes back. It's not necessarily worse. It's not necessarily progressing. So the patient needs to know what to do for themselves. So this is the pathway. And I just, on this program, want to show you the funding. You start with very small funding from Physio New Zealand, NZMPA. Then I had a Jack Thompson Arthritis Grant. Then it grew a little bit more to an HLC Activation Grant, then the Stanley Paris, and now a 3-year HLC. So from 2015 to now, it took 8 years to get an HLC project. And I do thank the full team, everybody along that whole pathway that helped towards it. So in the first 2 studies, again, I've got honor student, Melissa Gillespie. We recruited 10 participants and she interviewed them to find out what they think is going on in the shoulder. And they all said it's in the shoulder. That's a problem. You need to fix my shoulder. In 2015, when we wrote the grant, pain neuroscience education was a big new thing. But it's common for really chronic pain, but we were starting to use that for people with persistent pain as well. So I wanted to develop a tool that was relevant for these people. And I developed a PowerPoint slide. It was up to an hour, including conversation with the patient to find out what was relevant for them. And then we followed up every week for 3 weeks. So they came in just for a few minutes, just in case they had any questions. And we interviewed them 3 weeks later. And what I found that they were more aware of factors that influence the pain, and they seemed to be able to control the pain better, and they were not worrying that much. But the pain was still there, so that they still wanted to know how we can fix them. So the next one, so that was a proof of concept of whether patients can accept that. But an hour is very long, it's very heavy, so I broke it down into smaller pieces, again, PowerPoint slides, and then videos as well that patients could watch at home. And we did add the anatomy and pathoanatomy because that's what patients want to know. They want to know how the shoulder looks and what might be going on. And then we added 10 minutes on what they can do themselves. And then this time, Rosie Acker, honor student, she interviewed them after. So we integrated that in physiotherapy. So 8 sessions of usual physiotherapy in our clinics. And the physios had to use the PowerPoint slides and the patients could watch the videos. And the patients were interviewed afterwards. And without exceptions, all of them spoke very highly of the physiotherapist. So the patient physio report was really important to them. And I think by talking more with these physios, giving them more information, asking them, bouncing back and forth, that probably helped with developing that rapport. But there were 2 groups of them. Some of them, in the middle one, some of them thought this was absolutely fantastic, changed their mind about their insight about what pain is actually about. The other half thought it's not for them. And that's what we see in other studies as well. But at the end of the day, all of them, regardless what direction they came, they felt they were more in control, they knew what to do for the shoulder, they had more hope, and they had less worry. So I think sometimes if we share some information with patients, it has to be relevant for them, but sometimes they think it's not for them, but subconsciously there's some, like the students when they learn, some learning happens subconsciously. So that was a feasibility to see whether we can integrate those resources into physio, and then decided yes, it can, it seemed like it, but then we wanted a website. And for this one, we used a new methodology where Ali Calder was our methods person, participatory action research. So instead of us deciding what needed to be on the website, we asked people with shoulder pain, there's at least one in the room here, and physiotherapists. So we had Tracy Pons as a physiotherapy specialist in pain, and Nancy Longnecker as professor in science communication, and here Rosie Acker was now an early graduate. And this is Stuart McKenzie from our media unit, and Jenny Steen was on our RA in my kitchen at home, filming something. I was the model because nobody else wanted to be the model, but the patients told me that's what they wanted. So we were, the research team were absolutely nervous at the beginning because we couldn't make decisions. We had to listen to others. But in the end, it was it was so much fun. 5 meetings with the stakeholders, and then everybody had homework in between. And we eventually came to this website. And it's hosted by TurboWeb, which is here in Dunedin. So it is available already. It is very much focused on New Zealand and on our health system. And we are now using it as a tool in the next studies. So every part of the study builds on the other one. So last slide on the shoulder, this is what we're doing at the moment. So for the Stanley Paris Fellowship, that fellowship has to be aligned with manual therapy. That's the important brief. And what we're doing here, we want to see for people with that rotator cuff pain, we want to see whether manual therapy, adding that to usual physio, which is the education, self-management, exercise prescription, whether manual therapy has any added benefit. It is a pilot study, only 60 patients, but it will give us indication of, firstly, whether a larger study can be done, and what the effect or the benefit of manual therapy we'll only be able to answer that in a larger study, but it's the starting point. And we are integrating that website into the study as well. And just to say thank you to the physio clinics here in the school and Christchurch Physio, who are the providers. And then it's the step care that Lee mentioned. That's the HLC study. So here we will have 200 patients and add focus physio in Waikato, in a predominantly Māori area, and Auckland Shoulder Clinic. And the problem with with rotator cuff related shoulder pain, it's often patients that can't get ACC, so they either have to pay themselves or they have to go to Te Whatu Ora, where there's often a long waiting list. And to get those people through quicker, you offer only 1 or 2 sessions and then follow up with them and then give physiotherapy to those who actually still need it. And that's exactly what we'll do here. One group will have pragmatic physio immediately, exactly like this group here, and the other will be offered 2 sessions, and we will catch up with them at 6 weeks and then offer them more if they need it. So I can't say more of that, and we have Christina Douglas, who's our very valued project manager for those 2. So last one is the concussion. Now I got into concussion by default because John was part of the New Zealand Rugby Research Group, and when he went on retirement, he asked me whether I would like to join that study, mainly being the ethics holder. And of course I said yes. And I started working with Danielle Salmon and AUT colleagues. And at that time, New Zealand Rugby was assessing how good the concussion management pathway works. And those were the studies they were doing at that time. One of the findings was that they often lost students with concussion at school, where schools had no idea how to look after them, support them, and get them back to learning, and also get them back to sport. So we started this, it's called the Frank study. And it's not funded by New Zealand Rugby, and this is definitely beyond rugby. It does include rugby players, but it includes any person with concussion at school. Could be 2 people banging their heads, which has happened this year, racing to get their rucksacks. So over 4 years, we're now in the 4th year. In the first year, we worked with 2 schools in Auckland and 3 here to find out from them what is working, what is not working, and what might work. So yes, the attitudes were very different across the schools. Some thought it's not a problem at all, why waste your time? Others thought it was absolutely critical, but they didn't know what to do with it. Very different healthcare access. Up north, all schools have a nurse. Here we don't. Concussion education was sometimes given, most times not. And of course, the schools all have very different resources. So we worked with them. We interviewed, I think it was 123 participants. And with them, we designed a framework that can work and is adaptable for each school. And it's basically just a process from having an email and then having a person who answers that email, and then that person letting the right teacher and dean know, and then checking in with the student every week to make sure they're getting better, that they have seen a GP or not. It's simple but adaptable. And in 2022, we implemented in 5 schools, and last year we worked with 7 schools. So we've now worked together with 14 schools across the country. Post-COVID, Auckland was really difficult with non-attendance, so concussion was not an issue at all, not a problem for the schools. They had more important problems, as in Hawke's Bay with the flooding. So we now have an agency activation grant to develop more formal resources, and we'll roll it out to the whole country. And I think that study probably will be the most meaningful that I've done for a long time, because there's a real tangible outcome. So take-home messages for researchers. Grow your network, but it does take time. Sometimes these relationships come by chance, and it must be people that you can work with. Keep your peripheral vision open, because nothing that I ever did was what I wanted. It just, when I needed something, there was something there. So yes, have a plan, but be willing to change it. Opportunities often come, including of grants, come at unexpected times. Keep a broader platform to remain flexible if there's a change in funding or change in the health needs of New Zealand. So I've got different methods that I work with, and different areas of the body, in a sense, that we're looking at. Clinicians, listen to your patients, don't blame them. Build their confidence to move and self-manage the pain wherever that's possible. And my big thing is progress towards unpredictability in exercise, not just the perfect movement pattern. In terms of patients, if there's somebody here with pain, movement is important for health and for your injury. The most important exercise is the one that you'll actually do. I think we all know that. And you, as a person, has a say what that exercise should be, or physical activity. Seek a healthcare professional that listens to you, who can take the time, and who helps you to understand what you can do yourself. That's regardless what type of pain you have. Thank yous. Firstly, to my family. Come on. First people to say thank you of my family. Chris had to sell his practice in Rondebosch. We sold our little cottage, Groeneveld Road, to come here. As I said, you didn't have a choice, but you had to come. And as you see on this one here, we're perfectly acclimatized to Dunedin. Claudia Sebastian had wonderful opportunities here, and Claudia is now back going from an occupational therapist to primary school teacher. And of course, we really do love the environment here. Our staff, thank you for your support, collegiality, and also friendships. Work is not only about work, it's also part of our life, and it's also about friendships. Some people are not with us anymore, they've left us, others will be leaving, and others have come since then. Our students, you are why most of us are here most of the time, and you inspire us. And also the postgrad students. The sports medics, there might be some here as well. This is when the football tournament was here last year, and the Swiss team that was based in Dunedin. Their physios were willing to come and talk to our students, which was great. Our family friends, there's not everybody, but representatives of them. So Keritani, Muller Hutch, Arrowtown, just at home. You basically are our extended family. And then the communities, St. John's, Roslyn, that we joined when we arrived. Children have moved on, and that's fine. Like running community is absolutely critical, particularly to keep Chris and Claudia sane and active. And Sebastian and I on the sidelines. And then Dunedin City Choir, that's really connects me with my music. There are always only two things I have to do what the conductor says. Thelma is here as well, and Colin. Do what the conductor says and stay in tune. And we've got a concert coming up. And then, of course, all the people in research that I've worked with, starting with my PhD supervisors. Stefan isn't here, but John and Helen are here, so I'm very lucky to have you here. My own PhD students, or those that I co-supervise, there are more, I just couldn't fit them in. The ACL group on this side seems to be mainly males, but there are women involved as well. The Frank's Concussion group here, these RAs were absolutely critical because they were working in the schools. And then all on the side is mainly shoulder related. So after a while, you start working with up to 50 people. And I found that quite humbling. And I'm standing here, but it's everybody who we are actually celebrating. So I end off with this quote: "There's beauty in differences in strength and unity." That comes from a TV program that you all should look at the Chatham Island about Maori Moriori and the Pākehā. And our differences are different nationalities, different parts of physiotherapy. We've got clinicians, we've got researchers, statisticians, patients, stakeholders, and those we need to be different. We can't all be the same. And our unity that's our research outputs and impact, and our students, because that's why we're ultimately here, and that is what is our strength. So I leave you with that. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thanks.
Ngā nui, Gisela, thank you very much for an excellent lecture. And there was a lot in there, wasn't there? So thank you. It was lovely to hear about your family and your journey. And I guess the message is that sometimes opportunities come and we have the choice to either take them or not. And I think you've shown us that it's important to take those opportunities. I think many of us in the room can relate to your story. I think many of us don't end up where we thought we would be at the end of high school. So I think we can relate to that. We've learnt a lot, I think, about common injuries and how you can manage them. Most of you know that I'm an anatomist by background. So for me, it's really important, it's really good to see the clinical applications of anatomy, both the anatomy of the various joints and heads, but also the neuroanatomy that's important, the importance of sensory motor and proprioception. I think one of the things that's come out of your talk is the importance of a holistic approach to any injury, and the importance of not just thinking about the joint or the head that may be injured, but the importance of thinking of the patient's well-being, their mental state, and the social factors that will impact their recovery or not, as the case may be. And I think sometimes we don't take that holistic approach, so it's really important. I think it's been really interesting to see the breadth of your research, both in terms of lab-based studies, action research, and clinical research. We need all three of those to actually help people get better and to move more. You talked about your take-home messages, so I think for us who are patients, it's important that we find a clinician that we can talk to who understands us and that we trust. For our clinicians, I think it goes without saying that we train our students to listen to patients, and that's really important, and to be realistic and understand the other factors that may be impinging on our patients' lives. And then, of course, for our researchers, we really do need to build networks, be nimble, and think more broadly. So perhaps the final message is that all of us need to keep moving and to move effectively as we live our lives. So thank you. I'd like to call you up and give you a small token of our appreciation, and I'd like everybody to thank Gisela again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So my last task is to thank you all for coming and to invite you all to join me and Gisela and her family at the staff club for some refreshments where you can actually talk to Gisela and the family and tell her what a good job she's done. So please come and join me in the staff club.